A lot of teaching can be dealing with parents or challenging behavior in the classroom. And you're like, I wonder why I have this reaction, but my colleague doesn't. I think that the Enneagram can offer a lot of insight into that.
Welcome back to Educator University. Today's episode is for every teacher who's ever wondered, why do I respond that way? We're diving into the Enneagram as a tool for self-awareness, sustainability, and stronger collaboration in the classroom. Our guest is Laurel Roberts-Meese, a licensed therapist and founder of Laurel Therapy Collective. With over a decade of experience helping high achievers, including educators, she's here to break down the Enneagram and how it can support our best teacher life. Welcome back, Laurel.
Hi, happy to be back.
Yes, so happy to have you here. Let's just start from the very basics. For teachers who may have never heard of the Enneagram, have no idea what we're talking about, what is the Enneagram?
It is a typology system that I have found to be the most dynamic and trauma informed and useful in relationships, whether that's romantic, social, professional, or educational. It gives everyone a roadmap to be the best version of themselves. So a lot of people have favorite typologies. Some people really love astrology. I'm not here to knock astrology. This is just very different. Some people really like Myers-Briggs, or there are these other typology systems that everyone kind of resonates with a different one. And this is my favorite, and I've used it in my personal and professional life for over 20 years.
It's a system that allows us to understand personalities so we can be a better person in a relationship or also better
Yeah.
for ourselves in a way. It's a tool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I said it's really trauma informed because, okay, I'm going to knock astrology a little bit. But I think astrology and Enneagram can go together. But astrology is based on like a specific set of characteristics that are attributed to the alignment of the planets the minute you are born. And it is very true that we come into the world somewhat formed, right? But then a lot happens after that time, right? It's the nature versus nurture question. And I feel like the Enneagram accounts so much for that nurture, for the experiences that we have after we're born, and that really form our core desires and our core fears. And when we have a deeper understanding of that for ourselves, then we know how to improve upon what we're already doing well and what some of our blind spots might be in a way that's really non-pathologizing.
Yeah. So it's helpful for everybody and also for teachers as well as they think about their teaching skills and also how they navigate the professional landscape as maybe as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, and a lot of teaching, it can be dealing with parents or administrators or really challenging behavior in the classroom. And you may have a reaction where you're like, huh, I wonder why I have this reaction, but my colleague doesn't. And I think that the Enneagram can offer a lot of insight into that.
Yeah. So if a teacher, like I said, doesn't know about the Enneagram, now they
hmm
know, but
hmm
maybe they want to know which number. I think is there 8 numbers? I'm not actually
There's
fully
nine.
nine.
There's
Okay. So
nine.
there's 9 numbers. Let's say they don't know which number they are. Where can they go to find that information?
Yeah, there's a lot of resources on our website, which is laureltherapy.net. You can find all our Enneagram resources there, but I would also look at enneagraminstitute.org, or maybe it's .com, but I think it's .org. That they have really in-depth descriptions of each type. Whenever you Google the Enneagram, you're gonna get a lot of like quizzes. I don't love those because it's really hard to measure someone's motivation in a quiz. You can really only measure the limits of their self awareness and their behavior. And the Enneagram is about the motivation behind the behavior. When I lead workshops, I like to say, okay, let's say there's 9 people sitting at a table. They each have their own reason for being at that table, even though they're all seated there. And that's true in any scenario. People can exhibit the same behavior but have very different motivations for doing it. So there are these kind of 9 core drives in life that the Enneagram outlines as a way to understand that. And Enneagram, I should say, is spelled Enneagram.
That's good to know because when I was typing it in, I was like, wait,
Yeah.
EA? Yeah.
And it's capitalized for all of
Okay.
you English teachers out there.
Perfect. Perfect. So let's say a teacher now has taken the assessment or the however you might call it. Is it an
Just
assessment?
read it. I would just read the types because the tests are measuring behavior,
Okay.
not motivation. So just read through a brief description of each type. There's some you'll be able to eliminate right away. You're like, yeah, that's not me. And you'll probably have a few that are like, well, that could be me. Or maybe there's one that you're like, oh God, are they watching me? That it just feels like a little uncomfortable to be known on that level and to kind of be called out. One time I was reading a description of it was actually like a couple pairing. I was reading it to my now wife, and I was reading it to her, and she was like, "Are they watching us?
I love that.
How do they know?" Yeah.
That's so funny. So like you said, they can go and kind of get a feel for what they are. Let's say they
Mm-hmm.
kind of feel like this is who I am. I'm a this number.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking about their teaching styles, could you give a brief overview maybe of each of the Enneagrams
Yeah.
and what it would look like for their strengths and weaknesses within teaching? Yeah.
Yes. So let's do a primer because it's really hard to have a conversation about the Enneagram without going over each of the 9 types.
Yes.
I'm going to start with type 9 because type 9s don't get enough love, and it's easy to start with type 1. If you're listening to this, I want you to imagine that the 9 types are arranged in a circle and 9 is at the top. And then you just go around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way back up to 9. And there's a complicated connection of lines in the middle. Don't worry about that for now. That's like Enneagram 201. We're going to do 101 today. So type 9, they are often referred to as the peacemaker. Their primary motivation is to be in harmony with the people around them and to like not engage in any unnecessary conflict. And their fear is of being disconnected. So, as a teacher, that could look like really making sure everyone is included, kind of going along with what colleagues might like, and forgetting yourself a lot. Type 9s, they are wonderful friends, wonderful colleagues. They can have a decent amount of ambition, they can be excellent leaders. And there's this element of like self forgetting and wanting to keep the peace because conflict's really uncomfortable for them. So, as a teacher, you could really, be an excellent leader in helping create a classroom awareness of all of the different people and the different needs that show up in that classroom and helping teach compassion, helping, really have this umbrella consciousness and really wonderful community builder too. And some of the areas to grow are remembering your own needs, standing up for yourself or for people in your class or colleagues, even if that means engaging in a little bit of conflict, which is likely really uncomfortable for you. That conflict is actually not the opposite of disconnection. Sometimes we actually get closer by working through conflict rather than avoiding it.
Yeah, that can be very powerful. So if you're number
Yeah.
9, that's something you definitely want to think about and focus
Mm-hmm.
on. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll now go to type 1. I love type 1. I love all the types. I'm just gonna say I love all the types. But type 1, they can be called the perfectionist. I actually prefer the name the idealist because type 1s have a very strong sense of their personal values, how they believe the world should be. They're very justice oriented and they like rules and policies and fairness, right? You can see how this would make an excellent teacher, someone who has a clear vision of how things should be and steps to get there. And they make excellent leaders, excellent educators. They can be very detail oriented, and their areas for growth are handling the understandable frustration and anger that comes up when things are unjust or progress is very slow. They can sometimes struggle to see other people's perspective because their values and their perspective is so core to who they are. They can get a little caught up in details. I'm not going to say they're controlling because they're not all controlling, but themes of control can come up and be challenging. It's important as a 1 to look at incremental progress as still being progress, and the core desire is for good. But it's very personal for the 1 that there's something that they They feel that they are somehow bad or corrupt or defective, and all of their behavior and their orientation in the world is to try and compensate for that. So to be good, to be, a contributing member of society and working for a greater justice and cause. And the real personal journey for the one is to understand and know that they are good just the way they are. And they don't need to prove it to the world through unrelenting service and kind of self-sacrifice. Service is wonderful, and you don't need to be a martyr to do it. You need to take care of yourself and recognize you're deserving even if you have made mistakes. So that's the one.
Yes, and I feel like our conversation about boundaries from our last talk would be really relevant to that number one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
perhaps
yeah,
even more relevant to type 2. So
yeah.
I'll say types 8, 9, and 1, they share in common that their imbalances tend to show up as physical symptoms more often. Now, of course, all types, that can be the case, but they really experience life very physically. Nines is a little bit, and ones is they're going to see more aches and pains. This is kind of like very strong physical reactions to things. And with type 2, we're moving into what we call the heart triad, with people that experience the world primarily through emotion. Type 2, they're called the helper. And this is really kind of stereotypical feminine nurturer archetype, the helper. But there are many male 2s. I love male 2s, people that, have kind of bucked the social programming and want to be a nurturer and a caretaker in their community, even if that's not seen as traditionally masculine. Type 2s, they can look a little bit similar to type 9s in that they're very much about making sure everyone's needs get met and that everyone is cared for and feels loved. There's a little more ego involved in it with a type 2. A type 2, their deep fear is that they're not lovable. And so a lot of their behavior is done in an effort to be lovable. So taking care of others, making sure that they are needed, making sure that everyone around them feels loved. And the unconscious or maybe semi-conscious motivation is like, well, maybe if I make sure everyone else is taken care of, then someday someone will take care of me. What they rob themselves of in the process of, going about getting their needs met by taking care of others and being of service is that they never will actually know that they're lovable for just who they are, because some of the response is like a reciprocal love. Rather than, no, we just love you for who you are. Even if you weren't taking care of us, we would love you, right? So that's a real core wound for that too. And I'm sure people listening to this might be having a reaction. If you're having an uncomfortable or strong emotional reaction to some of these descriptions, that's a sign it might be your type. So we see a lot of 2s show up as educators because they want to love and nurture the next generation, and it's a great field to do that. But you can't, like the 1, make yourself a martyr in the process. Sometimes you're just going to have the love come from yourself and know that you are deserving of it, even if you're not taking care of people actively all day, every day.
Yes.
Type 3, they are called the achiever. There's a lot of celebrities that are 3s. These are people that are highly adaptable and they can pick up on what is needed in any situation and meet that need. So I think it's kind of an unflattering comparison to call them a chameleon or, like a social shapeshifter, because that's really not the goal. I mean, there are some people that have a little bit more like superficial goals here, but being highly adaptable is an incredibly important skill as an educator, being able to adapt to the needs of a particular situation or student or difficulty. And these people tend to be polished, they tend to be really achievement oriented. When they get to unhealthy levels, it might look like, success at all costs and, kind of a lot of glitter on top of nothing. But for the most part, 3s, there is substance to what they're doing and they just really want to achieve. It's a little bit of a variation of the 2 in that they want to be liked and admired, but it's not quite the same as like, I need to be personally loved. So their deep fear is that they're incapable and unlikable. And their journey as an educator and as a person is to realize, like, either you're good enough, you don't have to achieve to be liked, and that authenticity is really the way. Sometimes threes can get a little bit removed from their own sense of authenticity and values because they're responding to their environment. And being grounded in a personal values system and authentic self is really important. Type 4, these are, in Taylor Swift terms, the tortured poets of the Enneagram.
That's me. I'm a 4, so
You're a
I've been
4.
on the edge of my seat to hear what I'm all about.
4s are, some 4s are delighted to hear that they are the most complex type on the Enneagram, that they are, highly emotionally attuned, deep feelers. Like, they really experience everything through emotion. Incredibly creative, artistic, expressive, and individual. Authenticity is a core value of theirs. And this can be a wonderful thing as an educator, to encourage your students to be authentic, to encourage creativity and authenticity in every way, coming up with creative assignments and encouraging that original thinking in students. I mean, that's education, right? With that, there's a little tendency to feel separated from everyone else, kind of like you're a little bit different, and that you are maybe not part of a group of peers or colleagues, or that you're somehow different, or that you have kind of a disadvantage, that you experience things more intensely. And sometimes there's truth to that, but it's often exaggerated for the 4. The 4 desperately wants to feel included and connected, but they do not want to be separated from their authenticity. Conformity feels like death to a 4. So they are called the individualists. They tend to be a little more reserved and a little more introspective, but they can make fabulous teachers. So that's those last 3, the 2, 3, 4, that's the heart triad. They're experiencing things primarily through emotions. And now we're heading into the head triad. Type 5 is called the investigator. You would probably see some teachers that are a 5. You might see them a little bit more at a college level, because these are intensely cerebral people who primarily like to experience the world through ideas and concepts and theories. This is someone who figuratively or literally wants to take apart the toaster and understand how it works. They are really good at puzzles. They're great at solving complex problems. They also can be very good at innovation and kind of thinking ahead of their time. There's strong evidence that Steve Jobs and Bill Gates are a type 5, that they have this kind of innovative quality that often, in some context gets mocked or dismissed. Like, oh yeah, no, you're never going to be able to put a computer in every household. What are you talking about? And yet now we have a computer in every pocket, These, they tend to be very niche-y, that they really drill down on something and they become an expert. So this is why you see a lot of professors or people that are doing highly technical work in tech jobs. You're going to see a lot of 5s. The core fear for the 5 is of being depleted and without resources. So they are very protective of their time and energy. Emotional conversations are extremely taxing to them, and they often have limited social energy, and when they're out of energy, they're out, and it's incredibly vulnerable. So they're going to go to great lengths to preserve that energy. I'm married to a 5, and most of her behavior is explained through that resource conservation and also wanting to be an expert. Really the core of the 5. Type 6 is called the loyalist. I think we're going to see a lot of teachers that are type 6s. I have some friends that are teachers that are type 6s. And type 6s, this is the only type where there's 2 variations. You have the phobic 6 and the counterphobic 6. The phobic 6 is most of the time what you see in the 6 presentation, which is someone that has a good deal of anxiety and a really fraught relationship with authority. Like, they understand that hierarchy and authority has to exist, but there's a bit of distrust with authority. So there might be some tension with administration, or like, why is this the school policy? Sixes are fantastic community builders because they understand that safety and collective meaning is built through community. So they are joiners, they're going to be part of clubs, and they're probably going to be, a union rep, or at least, like really active in the teachers union, and just kind of creating community because that feels like safety to them. They often have a great sense of humor. I think people that tend to be more anxious kind of innately have a sense of humor that is a coping strategy. And so they can be really funny. And there's that undercurrent of anxiety that really runs strong there, because we all need a certain amount of protection and stability. Sixes are great with routine, stability. They're the kind of person that is just fine showing up and doing the same job every year, right? That does not worry them. With the counterphobic six, their response to their anxiety is actually to like press into it and challenge themselves and do things that a lot of people wouldn't do, either literal or figurative skydiving, or like really challenging authority, kind of taking big risks, making big swings. This is their way of trying to master that anxiety. And so it can look like other types, but if the core experience is of anxiety, you're likely looking at a six. Now, of course, all types can and do experience anxiety, but it's kind of a foundational experience for that six. And it can be an existential anxiety, not necessarily tied to a certain thing. Type seven, I have a feeling there are a good number of type 7 educators as well. These are people that just have an existential FOMO. They do not want to miss out on anything in life. They want to taste every dish at the buffet of life. So this is the person that after work, they're going to line dance lessons, and then they're going to their bowling league, and then this weekend, they're taking a motorcycle trip up the coast, and then they're going to a music festival, and they have 4 kids and 3 dogs, and it's just like there's so much going on, right? And they're generally high energy, extroverted, like really fun people. The undercurrent with the 7 is that they're deeply afraid of being deprived or in pain or uncomfortable or trapped. They don't always love committing to plans. They love having options for the weekend, or like, yeah, I don't know what courses I'm going to teach next semester, and like, well, the deadline is past, man. But they can be really fun, and you also get a little bit of flightiness that can be a problem, and it can be annoying to colleagues, and you can actually miss out on a lot if you're not willing to commit to some things. So high energy would have a high energy classroom and a really fun classroom, and you just want to make sure that there's some consistency and some structure with that, so that the classroom isn't chaos. Right? Type 8, we're at our last one here. Type 8, they are called, I should have said type 7 is called the enthusiast, and type 8 is called the challenger. This is kind of the opposite of your type 9. And I'll preface this by saying you can have very healthy 8s and you can have very unhealthy 8s. As all types that can have very healthy and very unhealthy, you're going to notice an unhealthy 8, and it's going to be a very abrasive personality. A healthy type 8, wonderful. You want them on your side. So the 8 is called the challenger. They do not like being confined. They don't like being told what to do. They are very, they can be bullish. They can be a bit of a bully if they're not healthy. These people are great advocates. When they see something they don't think is right or just, they will speak up. 8s are fascinating because they actually build trust and intimacy through conflict. They want to know that you can actually engage in some tension and disagreement, and they're more likely to trust you if they see that you can handle that. So a lot of lawyers are 8s. There are some current politicians that are 8s. There are also some public figures. And these are very strong personalities. And when they're on your side, fantastic advocates. I would definitely want an 8 next to me at an IEP table. Right? Because they're not afraid to speak up, and they don't care about rules the way a 1 cares about rules. 8s maybe should care a little bit more about rules. I particularly have a fondness for a female 8 because there's a lot of masculine energy with this type, and a female 8 has made it through life without absorbing this, like, oh, you just need to smile and be agreeable. Like, that isn't the only way to be a person. And so I have a special fondness for a healthy female 8 that is not afraid to challenge, that is not afraid to speak her mind, and to stand up and defend others. So that's the 9 types. We did it.
Yes, that is such good information for teachers listening. They can figure out what their type is. So my question is, could you be more than one type? Like, is it just one type or could you be multiple? Yeah.
So you have a primary type that is always your type.
Okay.
And it forms late adolescence, early adulthood. Like you're pretty locked into that. But you will have a wing, which is a type right next to your type. So if you are a type 4, you could have a type 3 or a type 5 wing. It's always going to be one of the ones right next to you. If you're a type 9, you can have a 1 or an 8 wing. If you're type 1, you can have a 9 or a 2 wing. And so it's kind of like your vacation home. Like you have some of the traits, like you can access the strengths of that type, but it's not like your full-time residence. And then this is getting into like the complexity of the system, but we move to different types and we can take on some of the traits of types when we are either stressed or in health. So a type 3 can look like a type 6 when they are very healthy. So being very community oriented, like caring for community, maybe being a leader in community, having a little bit of anxiety, but also just having more of a collectivist approach than the 3 who tends to be a little bit of a they can be a little bit self-promoting, right? And when a 3 is unhealthy or stressed, they're going to look like a 9. They're kind of going to shut down and dissociate and kind of forget themselves and disconnect from things. So every type has different arrows that they move to in growth or stress. But you're going to have one full-time house, and it doesn't change over your life.
So good to know. And that's kind of those ones next to the house. So
yeah, so it's a very dynamic system. We all have some of every type in us, right? Like
yeah.
I may only have like 5% of a 5, but I can draw on it when I need that 5%.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good to know that it's not boxing us in. It's actually opening it up to just understanding us more.
Yes.
And what we are.
Absolutely. And like I said, this is non-pathologizing. This is like the map to being the best version of yourself. If you're a 6, and you know that the way you grow is by self-soothing, mastering that anxiety, making peace with systems of structure and authority, and being an active member of your community, then that's a great map, right? If as a 2, you know that your path to growth is not making yourself needed in every situation, and that you can actually just be a participant and you might feel more loved if you pull back a little bit and don't get your ego involved in all of your relationships. So I can understand how people might feel a little pathologized by some of that, but it really just is a map to being the best version of yourself.
Also getting to know your people around you, whether it's your relationships or also within the teaching sphere, maybe some of the coworkers. Is there a way that this Enneagram can help you understand your coworkers, especially teachers, other teachers, or maybe even your administrators in your building?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure as people were listening, some people came to mind. Now, you're not supposed to type other people, right? And I've been using the system for over 20 years, and even I get it wrong sometimes because remember, this is about your motivation, not your behavior. So you may have a general sense of someone else's type, particularly a partner or a close friend. You definitely want to ask them to double check. But if you have a general sense, it gives you an idea of how you can approach conflict or collaboration. So Let's say you're a 4 and you're working with a 1. That 1 is probably going to be pretty direct and they might struggle to see your perspective. And you might feel like your emotions and your authenticity and the creativity that you bring to the conversation are not appreciated. But if that 1 understands that you're a type 4 and they can tailor their interactions with you to account for your strengths and your areas for growth, you're going to have a lot more productive conversation. I have done like some business coaching where it was very clear I was looking at a type 8 and a type 4. And those feel like very diametrically opposed, like a more emotionally attuned, sensitive, authentic, creative, expressive person, and someone who essentially feels like a bull in a china shop because they're like, no, this is wrong. This isn't how it should be. Why can't you just do this job? You got to translate for each other. You can't just expect people to adapt to your style of communication and work. So understanding other people's types really unlocks a lot of potential. And also, I know when I have a complicated problem, my wife's going to be able to figure it out in half the time because she's the one that likes to take apart the toaster. And I just get frustrated when I can't find the right screwdriver,
Yeah.
figuratively. So, like, really tapping into the strengths on your team as well. Yeah.
Do certain types end up together more often in terms of friendships or relationships? Is that something that you see, like, oh, like a 1 and a 5 or something? I don't know, I'm
Yeah,
saying
yeah.
numbers, but I don't know certain numbers.
Well, looking at the kind of introversion extroversion balance, your more extroverted types are going to be 3, 7, 8. Your kind of middle of the road are going to be 1, 2, and 6, and your more introverted withdrawn types are going to be 4, 5, 9. So, but it's completely possible to have very mixed friendships, right? I have friends, I have some 8 friends, and I don't know that there are more likely types. I do know it's very rare to have same type close friends or marriages except for type 4. Type 4, they feel a sense of like, oh, you get me in a way that's like, you appreciate my uniqueness and my sensitivity and my authenticity. And I see and witness how you are similar and very different from me. That there's something about that type 4 that they get along great, whereas like a 3-3, they would feel competitive with each other. Or a 2-2, like they just be trying to like out care for each other, right?
Yeah.
And you kind of want the balance of another type in a marriage or business partnership or teaching partnership.
Yeah. It's funny because in teaching we have co-teaching sometimes, and sometimes they're just random. And sometimes it's kind of just they're like 2 people put together, and I always feel bad because I think that if you could use tools like Enneagram, you could use tools like even personalities and just understanding people, extrovert, introvert, it might help with that collaboration piece when you're working with co-teachers, especially people who are working constantly in the class together. And I think this would be a great tool for possibly administrators. You don't want to type people, but also just like using it as a tool to help people make decisions about collaboration and partnership might be a great way to use it.
Yeah, I think that I strongly prefer the Enneagram to the Myers-Briggs. I could go into a whole thing about how the Myers-Briggs was just like made up by some lady, and there's not a lot of evidence to it actually. But my biggest beef with how Myers-Briggs is used and implemented is that, classroom or schools or companies will, have people do the Myers-Briggs and then use it as a very like reductive labeling of like, oh, well, she's an IFTJ or whatever, so this means that. And that's really not a good use of it. Similar with the Enneagram. It's not useful to just be like, oh, well, she's 4, she's sensitive. Like, don't do that. But like, well, here's what the 4 brings to the table. Here's where I might have personal challenges with it. And how can I use my strengths and how can I tailor my communication so that it's really effective with this person? Like actually operationalizing it rather than just using it as a label. I even heard a story where like some company had used the Myers-Briggs and they were like using it to like make hiring decisions, which is not good. And like even like some like lunchroom drama, like all of this type sat at one table and like this is to elevate and enhance your workplace relationships, not to like create little factions or like overly identify with it. You need to use it as an effective tool.
Yes, and I think that's what we're talking about is a tool.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
Yeah.
about it not only for administrators potentially to have in their brain because they're leaders,
Yeah.
but also I think to within the actual collaboration. Sometimes we're in
Yeah.
like PLCs, which are like little groups of teachers that work together, you know, for different activities. It might be good for us, like it could be kind of good to kind of get to know each other in that way. As I work with them, I'd like to know
Yeah.
who they are so I know how I could best communicate, you know, with them
Yeah.
and work with them.
Absolutely. I think where it gets a little tricky with the Enneagram is like we're talking about core fear and desire here. That is intensely personal.
That's
And in the
true.
wrong hands, that could really be misused. So, someone knowing that someone's core fear is that they're not lovable, if they misuse that, that's toxic and horrible.
Yes.
So, being very cautious and making sure this is an opt-in thing rather than like everyone needs to do the Enneagram. It needs to be opt-in because some people don't want that core fear and core desire on blast.
Yes, I love that you said that because that's very important. Yeah, this is
Yeah.
very intimate in a way. You're sharing a lot about yourself, and maybe in a
Mm-hmm.
professional setting you don't want to. So I guess you're totally right. It needs to be something that people
Yeah.
choose to do for sure. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I love that specification. So I think coming back to our conversation from last time about burnout, just kind of we're kind of circling back around to that. Thinking
Mm-hmm.
about the different enneagrams, is there advice you have for burnout in terms of each enneagram and what they should be looking out for to create a more sustainable career in terms of teaching?
Yeah, let me see if I can do a lightning round real quick.
Yeah.
Type 9, you have to remember yourself, take care of your own needs. Don't just kind of self disappear, right? Type 1, you're going to have to let go of some control and let some of the details slide. Not everything needs to be perfect. You're still good. Self care is going to look like learning to let some things go and pick your battles. Type 2, you're going to need to figure out a way to understand that you are lovable and good enough, even if you're not attending to everyone's needs all the time. Don't martyr yourself. Um, really, self care is difficult for twos. So, really making that a priority. Type 3 as a teacher, burnout prevention, you don't have to be the superstar all the time. It's okay to, uh, you know, ask other colleagues for resources and to show up and be good enough. You don't need to be extraordinary at everything. Type 4, your emotions are a powerful tool, and not everyone is walking through the halls of the school feeling as emotionally present as you are. And so practicing self-care and taking care of yourself and also staying connected to others, not isolating, not kind of going off in your little authentic emotional shell, but remaining open and connected. Type 5, that fear of being depleted can lead you to be pretty isolated. You do need to be connected to other people, and that's how you're going to get some resources and ideas. You don't have to come up with all of them on your own. Engage a little more than feels comfortable with your colleagues. Type 5s do not struggle with boundaries. They're great at it. They maybe have a few too many. Type 6, learning to self-soothe that anxiety, learning to make peace with structure and authority, and recognizing like it doesn't all fall on you. You do have community. Type 7, learning to ease into the discomfort of committing to something and those feelings of like, yep, I have this class for the whole school year and we're going to make the best of it, right? Creating a little bit of space in your calendar, saying no to things, and letting the FOMO come and pass, right? Because you will exhaust yourself. And also you do need to build some skills for dealing with discomfort and pain that aren't just avoiding, right? Build up those skills before you need them. And type 8, learning to soften your startup. And, you are very admirably emotionally involved, and you will speak up for what you believe is right. You can also take a beat. You can take a breath before you do. And because you're used to just giving so much of your life force to what you feel is just and good. So that's off the top of my head.
Perfect. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think that will give a lot of insight to teachers who are listening to be like, okay, if
Mm-hmm.
I identify with this, I need to focus on this,
Yeah.
especially going into this next school year so I can create a more sustainable career for myself. So,
Yeah. Because we
yeah.
want you to be able to do it for as long as you would like to, not just as long as you're able to. Because, I mean, listen, I had to go on an emergency medical leave earlier this year, and it happens to honestly most of us that something happens, but sometimes it's preventable and you can do things like take care of yourself to make sure that you actually have some career longevity.
Yes. Yes. Kind of closing off here, are there any final thoughts that we haven't covered that you wanted to share with teachers about the Enneagram?
Well, we didn't talk at all about using it with students.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, personalities are still forming, particularly in grade school. But when you get to like middle and high school and definitely college, you might have a sense of some of your students. When I was completing my licensure journey for being a therapist, which took many years, I was working with a lot of different families as a family assistant, like a nanny plus. And there were some of these kids, I'm in touch with almost all of them still. And some of these kids, like, I just could tell. I was like, that is a 4. They have a lot of feelings, and let me give them some tools to manage these big feelings. And they feel different than everyone. And how can we help them feel included while also being unique, right? And who they are. And so you might start to see some of those traits show up, and you can tailor your teaching and certainly your social emotional learning efforts to specific things that you see coming up in your classroom. And again, we have to be very open to being wrong about our first guesses about someone's type. So kind of making things general and including differences, different motivations, different like core fears in your social emotional learning program would be very helpful.
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up too. I didn't even think about using it for students. So yeah, using that
Yeah,
as also another framework, another tool to help us better reach our
yeah,
students and connect with them. So
yeah. Or I'm thinking about a 1 would be a student that would be terrified of making a mistake or doing something wrong or getting a bad grade. That they just feel like I have to be perfect, right? So there's a lot of ways you can see that showing up.
yes, love that. Well, thank you so much, Laurel. We have some quick questions at the end. I actually updated them because you are my first returning guest, so I have to
Okay.
make different questions for you. Last time you mentioned that you love to go to Broadway shows, so I
I
included a few questions about those because I'm so curious.
Yay!
I had so many questions. Okay, so first question, coffee or tea?
A herbal tea.
Okay, herbal tea. Favorite Broadway show?
So it's a show that just closed earlier this year on Broadway. It's called Suffs. It's a musical by Shayna Taub, and it is a musical comedy about the final generation of women that actually succeeded in helping women get the right to vote in the US. And I believe if there's any like theater teachers or like chorus teachers listening to this, there is a grant for schools to put on productions of this show. On Broadway, it was an entirely female cast, but it could be done with a mixed cast in a school. And I just feel like it does such a good job of much like Hamilton, but there's no rapping and stuff. But I think it would be much more manageable for a high school to do. It really pairs entertainment and education. So I just loved it.
That'll be great for teachers listening if they want to include that. So that's great.
Yeah.
I'd never heard of it. I
Hmm.
gotta go see it. Never even heard of that one.
Yeah.
So
It's
yeah.
touring the US starting in the fall.
Okay,
Hmm.
awesome. Favorite Broadway character?
Well, I'll just say the one that I would most like to play
Yes.
sometime, and that is very niche. There's a musical adaptation of The Secret Garden, and there's a character, Lily, who is like the dead mom who comes back as a ghost and just kind of wanders the set wailing.
It's like fun.
But it's one of the few roles that's written for a classical soprano. And as much as I would love to just be able to like belt out Elphaba, like that's just not the voice I have. So it's one of the roles that like my voice can actually do.
Wow, so you're a soprano.
I am, yeah.
Okay, wow. Yeah, I can hit those high notes.
Uh-huh.
You'd be Glinda then in the in Wicked, right?
I could maybe do Glinda. Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love it. Okay, would you rather be the lead, the director, or in the orchestra pit?
Probably director.
And last question here for quick questions. Last Broadway show you saw?
It was Suffs. I
Okay.
took my mom, my family, we were in Chicago. My niece was born, and we were staying there for multiple weeks. And I actually took my mom to New York City for 24 hours to see this show because I was like, my mom is the reason that I am a feminist. She got me started, and I need her to see this show on Broadway with me. So that was her Christmas present last year.
That's a huge trip from Chicago. I'm
It
from Chicago
was.
originally, and that's like 3 hours on the plane at least,
Yeah.
right? That is dedication. Well, thanks again, Laurel, for being here. Where can my audience reach you if they want to get to know you better or get to know your collective and everything? How can they best reach you?
Yeah, we are at laureltherapy.net or on Instagram at Laurel Therapy Collective.
And I will be sure to link that right below so you guys can click on it.
Thanks
Well,
so
thank
much.
you again, Laurel. You brought a lot of value today. And as always, grateful to hear you talk about the Enneagram and to hear what the teachers have to say in the comments.